From the body of an enraged Shigaraki would be a sprawling flood of extremities that perpetually rippled outwards. This fleshy mass would firstly make impact with the body of the rabbit hero Mirko, but it certainly would not stop there, as it would reach Bakugo, then pushing beyond the likes of Best Jeanist, who was luckily able to evade at the right moment, before ultimately crashing directly into Yue, demolishing a huge portion of the school. Yet nobody had any idea what they were actually dealing with here. Eraserhead would immediately call out to Monoma because of course it was his responsibility to ensure that Shigaraki was unable to make use of any of his quirks. However, Monoma would make it clear that he was looking right at the villain and that Erasure was most definitely active. Edgeshot would then begin to question how such a thing was possible, as if Erasure wasn't able to affect this ability of his, then it would mean that it's not a quirk. From which point, Shigaraki, quite clearly with the intellectual insight of the All-for-One consciousness, would provide an explanation. But before we go any further, this video is sponsored by QuirkChat. QuirkChat is the ultimate social media app for fans of anime, K-pop, gaming, or literally anything else. And now, thanks to this app, we can interact with you guys, the plot army, even further. If you're familiar with Reddit, it's like a video sharing version of that platform. You can discuss anything, and there are hundreds of fandoms to pick and choose from on QuirkChat. It's very easy to understand and navigate. Video threads on the app are called QUIPs, and you can either ask your own question or watch someone else's quip and leave a response. So if you've had an anime question on your mind that you've been dying to get some responses to, this is the place for you. Not only that, but if you in general just love discussing anime or anything else, there's no better place for you than QuirkChat. Plot Armor is now on QuirkChat, and we've created our very first quip for you guys to respond to. In the description of this video, there is a link to our first quip where you guys, the Plot Army, can let us know what series you'd like to see us cover on the channel. We of course enjoy all these series available to choose from, but would love some help deciding which one to cover first. Again, thank you to QuirkChat for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the app and reply to our very first quip. The link will be in the description. This in fact was not a quirk. Put simply, this was growth. No different from the hair on one's head or the nails on their fingers. The fact of the matter being that as quirks continue to undergo evolution, the body too must adapt to house said power, giving way for an entirely new form. This was expressed to be the peak of superhuman society, more infamously known as the quirk singularity, Doomsday Theory. And good lord, one might argue that Shigaraki was more of a monster here than he was a villain. The wretched growth of his form favored the appearance of oversized coral. His visage looked to be incredibly sinister and frightening. Horikoshi from the very beginning of the series has always loved drawing hands, and here he has taken that love to new extremes, which would appear to be somewhat of a theme with this chapter, but more on that later. Shigaraki would express that heroes have chosen to disregard this uncomfortable reality in an attempt to suppress the truth about humanity's future, considering them all to be oblivious to the true state of things. So yet again, the quirk singularity and the danger it poses to humanity has been brought up. And with how frequently this theory arises in relation to All for One, I am all but certain that this is a major portion of All for One's master plan that is yet to be provided. Especially considering the version of the plan expressed by Aoyama to Deku was not entirely accurate according to All for One himself. Now this fleshy expanse is certainly an interesting development, but in retrospect seems to have been alluded to in the past as well by All for One directly. And this is by way of his final fight against Homura's grandmother, Shimura Nana, the predecessor of All Might. A bit of which was presented to us by way of All Might Rising, the animated extra from the first film. Here, All for One stands atop horrendously elevated mounds of flesh, and what he directly stands upon looks like a massive humanoid foot that has eyes along its exterior. We have several toothy maws coming together to form a larger mouth, and at this point, All for One, similarly to All Might, is well known for his smile. Shigaraki, on the other hand, pun intended, is all about hands, and that is what we received here. Very interesting. Now, Mirko would actually manage to remove herself from this dangerous predicament somehow, albeit at the expense of her prosthetic arm and leg. But man, were these heroes prepared for this battle, as when she uttered the word spare, several replacement limbs would arise, and she would quickly gear up. Mirko would let Bakugo, who she'd refer to as Dynamite, know that she would hold Shigaraki off while all the others can regroup. Honestly, the fact that she saw this abomination and did not even hesitate to face it by her lonesome in the slightest is insane. Bakugo would correct her, however, in regards to his full hero name, and man would I love him to just drop all that extra stuff. But yeah, these two heroes were really similar in their mindsets, as Bakugo would instead tell the number 5 hero that she should be the one to fall back. From which point, these two would begin bickering until Best Jeanist would advocate for them to get it together. Monoma was really concerned by this current situation, but was certain that he had done exactly as Eraserhead had instructed, and so it could not be a failure on his part. Those hands were a serious issue. But just then, Mandalay managed to get into contact with Deku. And so while Monoma found a way to complain about the performance of Class A, Aizawa would question where in the world Deku was. Deku would then express that he had been taken by Toga to Octo Island. He would then proceed to request immediate warping. Now Sun Eater would concur, but Edshot would express that they could not. Monoma was incapable of using two quirks at the same time, and so switching between Erasure and Warp Gate would take at least 10 seconds. And just like Best Jeanist had said before, every moment of battle is valuable. And so in what would otherwise be a minor 10 seconds, the ungodly number of hands to emerge from Shigaraki would be responsible for an ungodly degree of destruction. The fact of the matter being that the very moment Erasure concluded, every one of them would be killed immediately, which is absolutely terrifying. So much for their anti-decay countermeasures. They were not prepared for this in the slightest, and this is him without a quirk. Good lord. I mean, come on, this guy, despite being imperfect at the time, was able to topple arguably the strongest hero in the world, the late Star and Stripe. So could this truly be considered a challenge? The pressure was on for Monoma, and all of them truly. Eraserhead would then express to Deku that he will need to make his way back by his lonesome. And past this, Best Jeanist would issue some sort of command to Mandalay. Now if you recall, Mandalay's quirk is Telepath, which allows for one-way communication across vast distances. So whatever he is expressing to her is more than likely an announcement to several others. And for Mandalay to also be here further cements the fact that for all the heroes, this is by far the most important battlefield. Best Jeanist would then, with the others backing him up, proclaim that they did not need one for all. Even without it, they would deal with Shigaraki right here, right now. And side note, but since Miruko's prosthetics do not actually seem to be as impressive as they initially appeared to be, my personal interests have instead shifted to Sun Eater. If you recall, Lunch Rush is present, so just about any manner of animal characteristics would be available to this guy by way of consumption. Within reason, of course. I mean, he could in theory resort to chowing down on Shigaraki's overwhelming flesh, which I really don't think he'll do, and see what he can do with it. Although the singularity might just rip him a new one, despite his comfortability with shifting forms. Anyways, 200 kilometers off of the Pacific coast, there was Octo Island. What was the current location of Deku? On the shallow beach of the island was a particular resort that boasted a tourist spot known as Octo Aquarium. And this aquarium was managed by Gang Orca, which if you are unfamiliar is most definitely a nod to Horikoshi's Homagadoki Zoo, where the very same character, Sakamata, Gang Orca's real name, belonged to an aquarium. Here, Gang Orca would yell out for his allies to evade the enemy assault. The Nearhai and Nomu were a serious problem, even more so than they were back in Jakku. And so the heroes would have to wonder if All For One had provided the monsters even more quirks than before in preparation for all this. But they certainly were not the only threats around, as former Tartarus inmates such as Moonfish, an early League of Villains affiliate, were here, and he was sporting a brand new look. Sirius, a previously anime exclusive filler hero, was here, and she would question if Sue was alright. Which she was, but would admit that Deku and Uraraka were in trouble as they had gotten caught up in the shockwave. Uraraka would question what Eraser had said in response to Deku, and he would then let her know that he will find his way back on his own somehow. She would begin to tell him to get going quickly, but suddenly, behind him would be Himiko Toga with knives in her hand, much to Deku's surprise, which was major. Toga seems to have overheard their conversation and would urge Deku not to leave, now expressing that she loves him, so she did not want him to go. Meanwhile, Uraraka would be left to be swept up by the waves. Deku was a bit panicked because his Danger Sense quirk was not activating for some reason, despite Toga swinging her knife at him. Deku was too dense to perceive Toga's feelings towards him, but the fourth user, from within, would recognize that Toga likes Deku so much that her threats are not registered as danger, which is a pretty interesting counter to one of Deku's most useful quirks, and one that I'm not too sure I'm all too fond of, as while facing off against the entirety of Class 1A, his collective of friends all willing to lay their lives on the line for the sake of supporting him, Deku had no issues with his quirk at all. From there, an unsettled Deku would question what exactly Toga wanted from him. And oh my goodness, unlike Uraraka, Toga was very direct with her feelings and let Deku know that she wanted him to be her boyfriend. And this crazy girl was completely unfazed and disinterested by the ensuing battle just behind her. Toga's love, it was so intense that it puts others in danger. Deku was completely shocked, while Uraraka was invested, but perhaps had not been able to catch everything on account of the wave momentarily taking her. Toga's confession to Deku is here, and apparently things only escalate further from here. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.